All right, so now we're talking about data standards. And data standards, also known as standard data models. So these are basically shared data models that are widely applied in one industry or another and shared amongst competitors to some degree. They're often defined by standards bodies like the IEEE or the W3C or schema.org, but sometimes they're also defined by database vendors or operating system vendors. These are the people who are making the software that's moving the data. And so data standards are absolutely everywhere. They're in every industry, transportation, healthcare, finance, entertainment. One way that I like to explain how data standards impact people's lives is by thinking about when you Google a movie. 5 years ago, when you Googled a movie, you might get some information about that movie. You might get links to a movie ticket website like Fandango or a movie review website or various different theater companies. But now when you Google a movie, you get at the top, you get the showtimes. If that movie is out in theaters, you get the showtimes from different theaters, over a course of time. And you also get information about the movie itself. And so the reason why that's possible, right? You have all these different studios, all of whom are competing for your money in terms of they want you to see their movie and not their competitor's movie. And you have all these different theaters, which are different companies completely, often, who are competing with each other to show you this movie, and yet everyone's has agreed to organize their information in the same way so that they can basically compete on product and not compete on information access. And so everyone's ordered their information. You can click on these movies. You can go see, different movies, different companies, all accessible because they're all following a data standard. And that delivers a lot of value. And this is why people create data standards, because they want to share information with their peers, with their competitors, with other service providers. And they know that if their information is structured differently from other people who are sharing similar information, then it's going to be very difficult. That whole information sharing process is going to be very difficult. And so the solution there is to create a data standard. And so the elements of a data standard, basically kind of three big parts, I think. You've got documentation, which is kind of the explanation of the standard. You have people who are using it and governing it and updating it, and you have tools that make the standard accessible. And so when it comes to the documentation, standards have names. They have specification, which is the explanation of the data model. And they have sometimes they have a data dictionary or glossary to explain the term specifically so that folks know really what's being discussed. Then on the people side, you've got the people who are using the data standard. That's kind of the community. And you have some governance structure that enables those people to influence the future of the standard. And then for tools, sometimes you've got a tool to validate whether or not a data set is compliant with the standard, and that's very useful. So people know if their software or if their software is producing data that is appropriate for the standard, that fits with the standard. And also sometimes they offer tools for actually using it in a functional way using the standard. Now it's important to remember that people before standards implemented, people are generally organizing their information in a custom way that they find to be agreeable and that meets their needs. And so a data standard has to deliver enough value to convince those people that they should stop doing what they have been doing and using their custom system and adopt a system that more folks are using. And so to do that, you have to have a really good standard, and that requires making sure that your information standard suits the needs of the people who are using it, not just the technologists who are implementing it, but the end users who are actually benefiting from that data. And so when thinking about this, about data standard creation, you want to think about the scope, like what exactly does your data standard fits within your data standard? In the example of movies, are we doing a standard for defining what a film is, like the actors, the name, things like that? Should the standard extend into showtimes of where people can see the movie? Should the data standard extend to theater productions, which aren't movies but are similar? So that's an important conversation to have. Then who are your stakeholders? Who are your membership? How do they make decisions? How frequently do they have meetings? How frequently do they anticipate versioning the standard so that it can, updating it? Is it going to be every year? Is it going to be whenever it's necessary? And then what's the process for implementing the standard, for implementing changes to the standard? So to actually create a standard, and I'm talking about a casual standard because there are a lot of very formal standards out there. And the purpose of this video, of this training, is to get people thinking about building shared data models quickly and easily with their peers. And so basically what you got to do, in my opinion, humbly, is bring stakeholders together to determine the scope, right? That you have to collect examples of how stakeholders are currently structuring their data, compare and contrast those data structures, those data models, to determine the most popular elements, propose a data model that everyone can live with, document the model so it's easy for others to adopt it, create tools that help people adopt it, such as templates and validators, and establish a routine for continuous collaboration. So now going through this in a bit more detail, here's an example of creating like kind of a shared data model. And so what was done here is you take a list of all the potential data sources and aggregate them and relevant information about them, particularly metrics about, in this instance, how many entries do they have? What's the format of their data currently? Is it accessible via API? So that you can figure out how much time and effort it's going to take to bring all these data models together, and how much value they're going to deliver when you do that. So, okay, so that's the first table. And the second table that we have here is taking the high value data sources, putting them on the top, and then putting every single field that they all have, every single field that each one of them has on the left-hand side. So if a field only appears once in one of these, that field would still appear on this left side list. And then you mark which data standards have which data models have which fields. And after going through that process, you can very easily tell which are the most popular fields within the, among the data models, among the data sources. And so when you have that, you get to propose. You basically can take the most popular ones, put them into a template, so make them accessible, and propose it. So building a template, right? And then so building a template is a practical way to create a standard because it allows people to quickly use the model, test it out. And a template might have not just tables, which are the structure of the data, but also taxonomies, which are the categorical terms used in a data model. They also might not have a taxonomy. They also might have a README, which is just explains, kind of which can have the glossary, and it can explain what the motivation is for the shared data model for the data standard, et cetera. And then it's important to remember what success looks like, and that's people using a data standard, the shared data model, and also them sharing data between each other with it. And that's where the real value is. And also, when people are using the data model and they're sharing data with it, people who are producing software, they're going to want to adopt the data model and build solutions on top of that data model because they know that people are already organizing their information in it, that it's relatively complete, it's useful, and it's been tested. So at the point where a lot of people are using a data standard, then you really need to think about the governance because the standard has to be improved over time. Sometimes that means regular meetings with a stakeholder group. Sometimes that just means having a simple process whereby if changes need to be aired, they can be aired, and a process can take place where those changes are implemented. And that's that. That's data standards. So thanks for listening. Hope it was useful.